What do we do about tight end Armageddon? That more this week on the couch. John Daigle, when there's blood in the streets, it's time to buy. Well, there's blood in the streets at tight end. A lot of teams are deciding what to do, whether you had one of them or don't. You should at least be on the ready, frosty, as Cecil likes to say. So what's the angle here? What are our feelings when we look over this tight end picture, knowing that there is a big shift going on right now in fantasy football of the haves and have-nots?
It's an absolute mess. If you have Travis Kelce, you have to be feeling absolutely wonderful right now, because the rest of us are struggling in these streets. I read the waiver wire column, of course, for 4for4.com, and I initially, as of Monday night, had Taysom Hill in there. But then once we lost Dallas Goedert for quote unquote a few weeks, and we're at the time of the year where a few weeks, you have to decide if you drop these players, because that may be holding you back, especially for shallower benches. I actually took Taysom Hill, who, mind you, has only had 4 total carries and no catches the past 2 weeks. I took him off the drop list because that's the landscape right now. Dallas Goedert and Zach Ertz were top 5 in fantasy points per game. Gerald Everett is just inside the top 12. He's day-to-day, not as serious, but still, he could be absent as well. And so David Njoku, we don't know if he win or if he'll come back. And so that's what we're battling right now. So honestly, everything's on the table. From a micro analysis, I do want to say I am worried about Trey McBride. I see everyone discussing his usage, 62 of 68 snaps, around on 76% of dropbacks in place of Ertz off the bench. And then they say, okay, he only had 1 target from Colt McCoy, so that usage should lead to more targets. But I would argue that's who McBride has been all year. He's seen 4 targets in 9 games. He's only been targeted on 4.5% of his routes this season. He's not earning, though, that opportunity. And so micro, I don't want Trey McBride. Macro, given everything else we've seen from the tight end landscape, you know what? Maybe he is a low and tight end one. So it's a mess out here.
Yeah. Micro, owning. I want to get that word out of my vocabulary. Having Kyle Pitts on your team has been a nightmare. Macro, maybe I'll trade for Kyle Pitts and it's going to work this time, right? That's the levels like we're experiencing this. And you're right. I mean, we take out 2 of the top 5 tight ends, Mark Andrews, and come on, what are the chances Mark Andrews is going to stay healthy for the rest of the year? Really?
And honestly, I have not worried about Mark Andrews so much this week, because when you're listening to broadcast, you know, Troy Aikman, Joe Buck, everyone else, they hint to things they heard in their production meeting and when they interviewed the coaches leading up to the week. And Troy Aikman even said, I think Mark Andrews could have gone, but it sounded like John Harbaugh was really aware of the bye week looming this upcoming week. And that bye week then literally gave Mark Andrews 3 weeks off. And so I actually don't worry about Andrews. I think he returns, but that's still not Travis Kelce either.
Right. I agree that you got Andrews, and it's the next best thing after Kelce. But at the same time, that makes me say we're going to keep monitoring Isaiah Likely, right? I mean, where we're at, just going again, like how depraved are we at tight end? We're looking at injury upside back. Noah Gray. Don't forget about Noah Gray. Maybe it's the Travis Kelce teams that step on a landmine next, right? And depending on how deep the league is, or if you're in a tight end premium league, then you might be making some preemptive moves or not dropping Isaiah Likely so quickly. Because as you step to the league, I'd write the waiver wire stuff at Footballguys, John. And I'm going back this morning and I'm adding as just one unit kind of players, because some people are going to need to just pick somebody off of the waiver wire this week to play at tight end. You might have been going naked Ertz or naked Goedert. And hey, Austin Hooper, Tyler Conklin, he's coming off a bye. I mean, this is what we're down to. Juwan Johnson's looking pretty good as a pickup. You might hold Cade Otton through his bye, right? Or alternatively, and I've been talking about this at quarterback too, John, you might play keep away. Defense on the waiver wire is fun. And you can look ahead too to see who might have a bye coming up at quarterback or tight end and try to just take one less option from them. And who knows if that value could appreciate, or like you said, you're looking for just some potential value growth. Like Trey McBride, it might grow. You never know. And again, you might need that. Your tight end option. So just surveying the picture, I'm just going to spit a bunch of stuff out because I just thought it's time to step back and look at the tight end picture. Okay.
Go ahead and spit out Logan Thomas as well, who
Ha!
season high in route rate last
Yeah.
night on Monday night. It's only grown the last 3 games since he returned from injury. And again, even in just seeing 4 targets, 13.5% target share, this is where we are right now in week 11. We have to roster these players.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, this is definitely where we are. Washington, I mean, at least Taylor Heineke, who should stay the quarterback, and knows just throw it to Terry McLaurin, good things happen. Okay, I think here are sells, and another angle on this. Heck, even if it's your best tight end, you might want to sell a tight end high right now to a team in distress. I think you sell Cole Kmet. And the reason I think you sell Cole Kmet is because Chicago's still like a 20-25 pass attempt a game on. Yes, Detroit lost track of him. Yes, he has touchdowns. Yes, Fields looks to him in the red zone. But I think that let me put it this way. I think someone might overpay for him right now. Someone that just lost Ertz or just lost Goedert might overpay for him right now. Some of the more boring options, right? Hurst, even Dalton Schultz. And I know Dalton Schultz has given you a nice solid 12 points a game, but he's already been banged up this year. And you're not really going to get true ceiling games. What if they get Odell Beckham? Tyler Higbee, these boring options. The guys I want to buy right now, John, are Kyle Pitts. And look, he's getting 5, 6, 7 targets a game. He almost had a 70-yard touchdown a few weeks ago. I mean, this is one of those situations that, like, look at Justin Fields. As the season goes on, they can sort of figure some of these things out. I mean, Kyle Pitts isn't a dead draw right now. David Njoku, and maybe Foster Moreau. That's the Raiders. But it's bleak. I mean, I guess again, it's almost like, John, this is going to be, if you had Ertz or Goddard, you better just accept that you need to make it up somewhere else and look somewhere else.
And I'm one of those people, admittedly, who has Kyle Pitts. I, like a lot of people, egregiously drafted him in the 3rd, 4th round, and I refuse to drop him. I refuse to watch him go off for somebody else. He's going to go off of my bench or do nothing. I am not giving him up. I don't even care if it wastes a roster spot the rest of the year. So that's where I stand with Kyle Pitts. I know people show up on social media and cite his prayer yards, as you and I would say. Yeah. And that's very true. You not only see Kyle Pitts on film constantly overthrown, but he is actually on Sports Info Solutions seeing the highest rate of targets that are charted as off target, 30% of his targets this year. And again, it's very clear since there have been so many touchdowns left on the board. And you talk about a team like Justin Fields, right? 23.5 pass attempts the last 5 games. Like, look at what this Falcons offense is doing. They're at the point now where Arthur Smith had to come in and defend Marcus Mariota, which always tells you you're at the brink of that quarterback being benched, especially when you have a 3rd rounder just sitting there for a 4-6 Falcons team. So overall, it's just a mess. Dalton Schultz, I do want to push back a little bit because maybe Odell Beckham does ruin it, but we've seen it now in every game from Dak Prescott. He's averaging a 21.5% target share. I know it's not sexy. The touchdowns weren't there before. We got there against the Packers, but at least we're getting that opportunity from Schultz. So I actually want to stick with Dalton Schultz. Honestly, if you can, in a package deal, convince the person with Schultz and you have Cole Kmet that Cole Kmet is like the better option all of a sudden with 4 touchdowns the last 3 weeks, you definitely want that deal. Like, I want Dalton Schultz a mile ahead of Kmet the rest of the way.
That's fair. I mean, I think we're both on the same page that Kmet is someone that people would overpay for right now. Like a perceived value versus actual value. And then, like I said, you look somewhere else. Looking again at the injury, the Ertz injury is a little less interesting to look at the fallout, simply because Marquise Brown is going to be back, let's say by week 14 for sure. Maybe not this week, maybe next week. But then again, you get, like you said, with Mark Andrews, that logic of let's just give him another week because that is going to help us have a better chance of a successful return. So Arizona, I mean, I guess maybe in the wake of that, you're looking like it maybe Kyler Murray. Like, I know that he lost Zach Ertz, but still, if you can get Brown or Rondale Moore, who's got his fuse lit now, and Nuke on the field all at once, now we're talking. But I'm looking at the Philadelphia injury, and this is just one of my obsessions. I think it's great. I hope that everybody who listens to my stuff and reads my stuff just filters out for my obsessions and knows that, oh, there he goes about Nyheim Hines again. Okay, I can just know that I can ignore that, right? And that's how I have been about Quez Watkins too. I just feel like Quez Watkins is one of those players that if something happened to Devontae Smith, those aren't prayer yards, John. the yards downfield to Quez Watkins. And I wonder if with Dallas Goedert out, if Watkins is the guy whose profile goes up in fantasy. But I think these are the kinds of things we need to be thinking about right now. Backup running backs. The idea being that more cataclysm is coming, and you just need to be ready to pick through the rubble instead of being one when you're not one of the people that the boulder fell on. And that's where I think we are with fantasy. I wanted to ask you this because my man Zari signal boosted when I said something earlier about the experience of fantasy football this year is eroding your confidence in your ability to prognosticate. So I'll just throw that out there and say, like, how has it felt for you, John? I know we haven't talked for about 2 months. How has it felt for you doing this thing that we do, avidly playing fantasy football and otherwise riding this roller coaster this year?
There is a lot of content in this space nowadays, right? So you have to, I am someone who listens to everything and then I ignore 99% of it, but I still like to have my blind spots covered just in case I may have missed something in my own research. But honestly, this year has been quite tough, not only dealing with injuries, that's an every year thing, but just given all the committees, given the fallout, given that now we're using a lot of advanced stats, but context is still so important to everything we do. That's kind of been the discussion with Christian McCaffrey, these past 48 hours after we saw Elijah Mitchell out touch him 19-18, and McCaffrey handled less than 50% of backfield touches. But, if we're providing context, one, and this Christian McCaffrey is going to represent like everything we're dealing with this season when trying to sort through the mess of numbers. One, Christian McCaffrey, he was still the RB11 in both PPR and half PPR leagues. So you still have a low-end RB1. And two, you can argue that was easily the game plan for the 49ers out of the bye against the Chargers defense, allowing a league high in rushing yards per game. Like, not only did they have 32 running back carries, but Deebo Samuel had 4 carries. That was the first time Deebo Samuel had more than 2 carries since week 3. He's been out of the game plan, out of their backfield, honestly. And so you can say, okay, that was clearly the game script. And you're telling me Christian McCaffrey, RB11, with 18 touches, and among all running backs on Sunday, this week actually, in week 10, who ran at least 10 routes, Christian McCaffrey still had the second highest route participation, only behind Austin Eckler. So you're telling me this is his floor, still being a top 3 running back in routes run and half the backfield touches and a RB1. And we can argue it was game script dependent. So if that's the case, I want to go out and trade for Christian McCaffrey while everyone else panics, thinking that Elijah Mitchell suddenly is going to get 18 carries per game. No. This is our opportunity because, again, you suck up that floor if that is the case, but we have so many reasons to believe it's clearly not the case after McCaffrey was swapped for 4 picks from this same organization. So I think, again, that kind of context is what we're looking at for everything. Prayer yards for Kyle Pitts. Cooper Kupp is another one. Let's talk about that because think about what this Rams offense is. Matthew Stafford in concussion protocol may or may not be back this week, but has made 2 starts since the bye, has thrown 60 passes. He's averaged 9.3 yards per attempt when targeting Cooper Kupp since the bye. He's averaged 3.7 yards per attempt, no touchdowns targeting anyone else. This Rams offense also in 3 games since the bye, averaging less than 4 yards per play, currently sits with a league low in yards per play and has scored less than 20 points in 5 of their last 6 games. So when everyone asks me, like, who do I pick up to replace Cooper Kupp? The answer is no one, because this is arguably the worst offense in the league. The better question is, are Sean McVay, Aaron McDonald, and Matthew Stafford going to retire altogether after the season, or are they going to spread it out at least a week? Like, that's the actual concern here. So again, context provided for everything.
Yeah. I love the story you just told there. I love it. And I think it deserves, let's dwell on it for a second. Did you ever see the internet, right? It's weird. Everything that's going on Twitter right now. Fantasy football, sports has been a big part of Twitter. So I don't even know all the different metaphors, right? The Titanic or all of them, right? There's so many good ones. I think I like the Overlook Hotel myself. Like, we're all in the Overlook Hotel, but really Twitter's just a microcosm of that. That's like our life, or being in the human condition. But do you remember an internet greatest hit? And I understand if you don't. You know the comic strip Garfield?
Of course, yes.
Did you see Garfield without Garfield? Like,
no, I did
not. For a long time, this is like 10 years ago. For a long time, they were running. They just took Garfield out of the frame, right? they just erased it out. And you saw that the comic strip was really about John going crazy, like living out all this, like when he was just talking to the air and he became the main character, you realize he was the main character all along. And that's what I think of when I think of the Rams without Cooper Kupp, in the sense that what's the Rams offense without Cooper Kupp? It becomes like a vacuum. It becomes a vortex, right? There's no offense without Cooper Kupp, really. And the answer to the replacement is nobody. And then I love how you just take it right down to the doom, right down. I'd love it here.
For those in the live crowd,
there it is.
Giving an experience. This is actually a brilliant comic. I'm so happy.
Yes.
John staring at what is supposed to be Garfield, and then the next comic is Now I'm Depressed. How beautiful is that?
Yeah. It's really fantastic, right? Garfield without Garfield, and the Rams offense without Cooper Kupp is such a vortex. I mean, you perfectly played it, that it takes you right to the next thought of, this is the end of an era. This is it, right?
The one exception, and it ties in to what we just discussed, is that we did at least, now it was without Stafford, but still no Cooper Kupp. Cooper Kupp banged up early. We did at least see Tyler Higbee, who, remember, only had a 9% target share in 3 games prior. Then no Cooper Kupp. Suddenly Tyler Higbee bounces back with a team high in targets on Sunday. So I do wonder, given the landscape, like, it is very possible Tyler Higbee was dropped because you couldn't start in the past 3 games.
Sure.
So, like, if he is out there, I think that's the one fallback I would have. But for everyone else, when they push back, Allen Robinson, Van Jefferson, Kyron Williams, even as we continue seeing the Rams use at least 3 running backs weekly, spread them out with no real identity or reason to how they'll use them. Tyler Higbee is the one player I will now push back on.
Sure, that's fair. Again, that's how bleak it is at tight end.
Yes.
Tyler Higbee, I call them the struggle targets. The target that means the offense is doing bad.
Yes.
This is the guy who's going to, and that's Tyler Higbee, and it was no coincidence when the going got rough, Tyler Higbee got going. And 6 catches for 50, 60, 70 yards is pretty good, pretty good in PPR leagues at tight end right now. But I love the doom and gloom around the Rams, because, well, it allows me to say something positive about the Lions, right? That they're going to have maybe 2 top 10 picks, and maybe theirs won't be the first one. So that is quite a turn. And hey, the Rams got their Super Bowl, so everybody's happy. Going back to what you said about Christian McCaffrey, I want to absolutely second all of that. It's time to buy. I said this morning, I didn't think we were going to have another window to buy McCaffrey, but I guess here we are. Go for it. I mean, shoot your shot for McCaffrey. And sometimes it's simple to me, John. He's a really, really good player. This is an offense that generally creates efficiency. So if he's getting at least 15 or 18 touches a game, you'll be fine. And these things have a way of sorting themselves out too. Elijah Mitchell, not known for staying healthy. They give him 18 carries a game. That's not going to last anyway.
That was my experience when I saw Jeff Wilson or Raheem Mostert this past week. Like, it's amazing to see what Jeff Wilson does. And when Jeff Wilson's healthy, there are many times we've seen him look like he's been shot out of a cannon.
Yeah.
I mean, to just dominate for 8 yards per carry against the Browns, I understand they have a terrible rush defense, but he looked special at times. The issue is, like Josh Jacobs, there is a reason they get injured every year, because of their violent running style and chasing down contact, as opposed to, you see those Tyler Lockett clips on Twitter where he never takes a tackle. He always falls down before someone hits him. Like, that's how Tyler Lockett avoids injury. That's why Jeff Wilson and Josh Jacobs do not. And so it's impressive right now, but, even though there was a clear passing of the torch to Wilson, I do question how long that can last, despite how impressive he's been.
Yeah, well, the answer is Miami running back, right? The answer is not. The answer is not which one. It's both. They both have great value. They're both. It's because of the offense, And I want to go back to that real quick. Another high-level sorter. I love it at draft time, and I start to think of it now, especially with waiver wire columns, things like that, or when you're panning for gold, is just the offense. Like, I'll take a gamble on an offense. And we're talking about stocking those last few spots on your roster, on your bench, for that, again, like something that might benefit from the next wave that comes through. And Miami might be, John, I mean, aren't they at the top of the list? They are the best offense in football. And I don't see any sign of anybody slowing them down right now. So I think that's something that Trent Sherfield is someone that needs to be picked up. because you're connected to that offense and you can see the potential for efficiency. So yeah, buy Christian McCaffrey, and then going all the way back to how this fantasy football season has been rough navigating. I just think what we're seeing, John, is like you said, committees or even offenses and defenses forcing each other into multiple modes, right? Like a defense can just look so good in one matchup, an offense that tests certain aspects of their play, but then against an offense that tests other aspects, they might look terrible and give up a ceiling game to the entire opposing offense and give a floor game up the week before. So there's wider ranges of outcomes for teams week to week. There's wider ranges of outcomes for one side of the ball. There's wider ranges of outcomes for individuals. And then you said you had injuries into that. And I mean, when I come back around to, I feel like I should whisper this. I mean, is our little profession here, is it just absurd? Is this kind of like, are we doing dada or comedy right now and just don't realize it?
It's also, as you said, this particular year, heading into week 10, actually, underdogs of 7.5 points or more were 20-9. Like, they covered. There is no good NFL team, you could argue. And we kind of saw the Bills and the Eagles even are two staples from both conferences. Okay, no matter what happens, at least the Bills and Eagles are very good. And then they both falter immensely as well this past week. And so that's why it's been one of the sharpest things to do. And professional bettors know this year, is that anyone basically 9-10 point dogs, like, that shouldn't exist at all. No team is good enough to cover 9 or 10 points, especially in a year where teams are averaging 4.4 yards per carry, which is more than the last 2 years as well, which also goes back to fantasy football. And we do need the league-winning running backs because the wide receivers aren't separating enough for us. As great as Justin Jefferson it hasn't mattered still in 5 or 6 games. You still needed the Austin Ecklers, the Saquon Barkleys of the world to be like actually dominating your league. Also Travis Etienne now, even though he did falter this past week. So yeah, that just the landscape of football. No one wants this. We want good football. We want pandemic football where there were no flags and they just let everyone play every single week. But that's where we are right now.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I think it's important to point out, it's so fascinating, John, with sports gambling really being brought in under the tent, right? I'm old enough to remember when the NFL really wanted to distance itself from gambling. That's why there would never be a franchise in Las Vegas. And now we see the game through the lens of the gambling community and how they react to things or how they process it. But still, that leaves the question, why, right? I mean, the gambling community, the bettors may be recognizing nobody should be giving up more than 7.5 points because no team is consistently good enough, or maybe consistently bad enough too, or just that wider range of outcomes week to week because teams are testing different parts of each other. Teams are also on a different, go ahead.
The Packers, just look at this past week. The Cowboys franchise was 195-0 in their history with a 14-point lead heading into the fourth quarter. But because the Packers can run the ball, a bad team that can run the ball, of course, came back and won and made them 195-1. The Packers had 144 rushing yards on second down alone. Like, that's because of the NFL we are in nowadays. Also, some terrible play calling by the Cowboys. But overall, like, it's because if you are a bad team that can run the ball, you're in it. You're in every game.
Yeah. Yeah. That was a wild game, by the way. I was waxing rhapsodic about that game earlier this week with Cecil. That, I mean, it's Green Bay, Dallas, and Lambeau. It's in the fall. We talked a little bit before we came on about seasonal affective disorder and experiencing the day ending earlier. So it was a night game. It's a memory. If you've been watching football most of your life, you've watched a lot of these Green Bay matchups with another really good team. They slide it to the late slot, so it gets that fall darkness and crispness in the air. And it was Aaron Rodgers and Mike McCarthy. And what an interesting story to have those two stories intersect at this point in both of their arcs, right? And I think what you had was Aaron Rodgers kind of like in the Packers franchise, the Packers fan base, because just like you were invoking with the Rams, I mean, if you're a Rams fan right now, or you're looking at the trajectory of the Rams, it's doom. I mean, it's about to crater, and so are the Packers. The Packers are about to crater. I mean, it's the Aaron Rodgers era has peaked. It's just a question of, is it going to be a crash landing or is it going to come down a little smoother? And they go ahead.
And I cited those stats to you, but also, I mean, just look at everything else in that game. Christian Watson had 88
Right.
receiving yards coming in, and then he explodes for 26 yards per catch and 3 touchdowns on only 4 receptions. In a game, he had 2 drops in the first quarter alone. Aaron Rodgers before that game was averaging 6.5 yards per attempt. He averages over 11 yards per attempt. He only passes 20 times in an overtime game. Like, all of it still suggests the Packers are a miserable team. But as you're saying, are they just slowly drifting down to their landing, or is it a crash landing?
Right. And it was an intense emotional
Oh, yeah.
fighting their way out of the corner. Basically, they were like, are you going to die? Don't die on me. You know, they're just going to die. Is the season going to die? Is the Aaron Rodgers era going to die right there on the field in front of everybody? Or are they going to get back up and keep fighting? And they did. You brought up Watson. Real quick, just to end that note on the gambling community. And like, they just know if there's an underdog of 7.5 or more, bet on them, because this season the teams aren't separating enough for that to be a reasonable line. But they still aren't saying why. Why is that happening this season? Why? That's clearly not the norm, and it's standing out. But you mentioned Watson, so let's go to Watson, and really not just Watson, but there's 3 players, I think, the really interesting speculative pickups that have a lot of reason right now for people to be excited if they have them. Maybe they're about to take off. Maybe it's a false start. There's Christian Watson. And like you said, just from a narrative standpoint, because I love stories.
Mm-hmm.
It was this team not being able to get the deep passing game going. They spent 2 second rounds on Watson, so they didn't spend any picks at the deadline. They didn't get Chase Claypool or anybody. Aaron Rodgers is miserable. Some people speculating, like, is he just overriding the offense and not letting them be in their home mode? Go ahead.
And you don't even need to speculate. Like, when you watch him play football, I don't think anyone enjoys their job less right now in the country than Aaron Rodgers. It's like, it's not.
He's a bad trip. He's on a bad trip.
As talented as he is, like, I do think it's fun to watch him, but it kind of makes it more miserable to watch him now because, man, he hates it. He hates playing football.
Yeah. It's so fascinating, all the stories, the NFL reality show that especially because it's not a sport where we see the players' faces during the game as much. So when you get those sideline shots where they really linger, I mean, sometimes, John, my wife always notices who just ran behind me, my little love of my life, that sometimes the directing on NFL broadcasts is cruel. It's cruel the way they linger on people when they're having bad moments, like some of the worst moments of their life. And through this thing of all of our millions of attention observing, like, they're amplifying one of the worst moments of this person's life. And that's just what we do. So anyway, you have Christian. Let's get back to fantasy football. What's really important, John. You have Christian Watson and all the amazing things that culminate with that story in that game.
Mm-hmm.
You have Rachaad White. And Rachaad White has been like, when you're watching that thing that's about to fall over, it's like, well, is it going to fall yet? No. You know, we were just thinking, like, is this? Now, I wonder with that one if it's going to be maybe a little bit of a fugazi, and it's just going to tip to a 50-50. I mean, the team is basically telling us, Todd Bowles, that they're situational guys, and it's going to be like a 60-40, 50-50 split. This isn't exactly a team great running the ball. And then Kadarius Toney. Fan yourself. Kadarius Toney with like 40% of the snaps on most of his touches, adding value. I mean, Andy Reid's not that dense. Has to see, like, hey, this guy adds value to touches. So Watson, White, Toney, are these going to be league winners, difference makers, sell high guys? What stands out when you think about that big trio from week 10?
I have Kadarius Toney over Christian Watson rest of season. And it's tough. The waiver wire is tough in general because you have to have the league wrapped around your finger by a Tuesday. Everything we do that makes it so hard, but especially because this time of year, there's so many touch and go injury situations. It's not just Mecole Hardman either. Marcus Valdes-Scantling left the game, returned, but how many times have we seen that it didn't matter? Dallas Goedert last night even returned, and now he's out for the next few weeks. And then Juju Smith-Schuster, of course, a concussion, which you've now seen players linger for a couple weeks. So all of these doors paved the way for more opportunity for Kadarius Toney, and that's all he needs, given that we've seen him now, not just the targets this past game, but also be used concertedly as Mecole Hardman with carries from behind the line of scrimmage and inside the 10-yard line. That's the kind of player we want, especially from Patrick Mahomes, especially with the talent of Kadarius Toney. So I still want Kadarius Toney, and I will gladly battle those uphill climbs that come with perhaps someone coming back and pushing him back down the roster, because I think he needs one chance, and maybe this week was that chance.
Yeah.
Christian Watson, I still like the spike week expectation. I don't look at the 3 touchdowns, everything we talked about, the drops even. I look at 84% of snaps, route on 84% of dropbacks, and more importantly, a team like 40% target share. That's what I need to know, given that Romeo Doubs, we don't expect him to really return maybe at any point this year. And Randall Cobb may be back in a short turnaround on Thursday. But for the most part, we don't expect Randall Cobb still to be an integral part of the offense. So since he was only really involved in one game this year. Also for Christian Watson, the schedule makes it even more interesting. It'd be so much easier to say fluke if it were not for the fact he's playing the Titans this week. Third most fantasy points per game allowed to opposing wide receivers. The Eagles, who continue to get tagged by boundary receivers in particular, where Watson's running all of his routes. The Bears, who Aaron Rodgers has a zip code in Chicago for. And then, of course, Rams, up-tempo matchup against the Dolphins. And then the Vikings, who are allowing the third highest rate of 15-yard passes. Like all of that is the perfect rollout for Christian Watson. So it's the schedule and it's the opportunity and an explosive player, the perfect cocktail at the exact right time you need him. So it does make Christian Watson a very, very sexy option, even though I'd still rather bank on Kadarius Toney. And then Rachaad White, I don't want to say fool's gold, because he can do enough in this backfield in a timeshare even to be serviceable as an RB2 or 3. But even the ramp up in usage he had received over the last month, he still only had one top 38 finish in his last 5 games prior to Munich, and none inside the top 30 with that ramped up usage. And then, yes, he did start over Leonard Fournette in Germany, but Fournette still outtouched him 14-11 by the time Lenny was injured in the third quarter. Then and only then did Rachaad White outtouch Keyshawn Bond 13-3 for the rest of the game. And so, given that Schefter has already reported that Fournette won't miss any time, I do think it's going to be more of a timeshare. And then you look and say, okay, this offensive line has been horrendous for the entire year, creating a league low 2 yards before contact per attempt. And do we really think Brady's only going to throw 29 passes every week like he did against the Seahawks, or will they be ramped back up to the 48 he was averaging before that? So there are too many ifs, honestly, for me to assume Rachaad White is now an every week RB2. And that's why I actually, we didn't mention him, but I prefer Isaiah Pacheco, honestly, over Rachaad White rest of season.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair because at least with Pacheco, there's something there for the taking, and there's instability with the potential for the Chiefs to maybe show some semblance of balance, cold weather football. Go ahead.
And, at this time of the year, we're stashing these high upside players who can maybe win your league. And I will point to weeks 14 through 18, the fantasy playoffs for a lot of people. And remember, yes, Pacheco only saw one target this past game, but still in handling 94% of the team's running back carries. We expect him to be now for sure at least the player for early down runs and positive game scripts when they're putting games away. And then you look at the schedule for the Chiefs, weeks 14 through 18, the Texans, the Seahawks, the Raiders, and the Broncos twice. Maybe the Seahawks hang around, but the Texans, Broncos, Raiders, you can't tell me those are going to be competitive games. And so that's the run out for Isaiah Pacheco.
Yeah, Pacheco is interesting because, again, with the weather getting colder, them being able to control games, maybe the defense continues to play better, then Pacheco can salt some games away. But Toney is the one that has that limitless possibility, excitement. And also, not just for this year, right? In dynasty leagues, a buy high offer for Toney, like a first next year plus something else. Who knows? Whatever. If you're feeling it, if you think, oh boy, we might really have something here, because he is only attached to the best passing quarterback in the league, probably Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes. It's going to be exciting. It's going to be interesting. All right. I'm going to bring up something that's taboo. I hope that's okay. I hope you're okay. I hope you're okay with taboos, because I just want to mention it, but I want to mention it as a setup to a larger point, which kind of ties back into something we already talked about. I'm going to mention fantasy receipts. It's kind of been a thing, right? I mean, it's like you don't. What is it? Wasn't there a Simpsons Halloween episode where it's like, just don't pay attention, like just don't look at the ads and they go away, right?
Yeah.
Just don't pay attention to. So I don't even necessarily want to signal boost it and bring it up for people to go, what's this all about?
Right.
But it's just another iteration, but maybe one of the most visible iterations in this idea of holding fantasy analysts, because again, is our job absurd? That's the theme today, John. Holding fantasy analysts accountable, which is, I mean, it's an entertainment industry. It's like holding astrologers accountable. No one suggests that, right? And just, come on. And the idea being that you later on say, look at this thing this person said that was wrong, right? And what's happening though, John, is it's almost the Ouroboros, right? It's the snake eating its tail, because some of the fantasy receipts dunking on somebody, now you can dunk on that dunk, right? That's like they missed the dunk. They went up for the dunk and the ball went 50 feet in the air and they landed on their backs. Because if you pay attention long enough in fantasy football, it's like a pendulum, right? You're right, but only for Cecil always talks about windows. I think that's a good way to think about it. Is the season moves forward in these 3 to 4 week chunks, and it makes sense within a 3 to 4 week chunk, but not in the whole season. And we try to make it make sense, but it doesn't. That's where we get nauseous, right? That's why we get seasick on the pirate ship. It's the back and forth. And there are times that you're weightless at one side or the other, like, oh, we're stopped. This is where we're going to be. Nope. Now we're moving again. And the real task for fantasy football going forward is absorb and process all of that change and know that we've got more coming, and be ready to react, as opposed to stop. And because I saw someone say fantasy analysts shouldn't take victory laps on, and I was like, just stop at victory laps. There's just no reason to ever take victory laps.
That's the way to do it. Yeah. And you see a lot of people, I try to respect everyone, but a lot of people we definitely respect. There's a reason why they never victory lap ever. We may text each other behind the scenes, but no, you'll never see me victory lapping. More like, I think I call more things out when I'm wrong more than anything, because it's funny. And to the point on fantasy receipts, we whisper it so no one checks it out. The issue is, it's like you said, Cecil says windows. I call them pockets, and you can be right in a pocket. It doesn't mean you'll be right in the next pocket. I look at, let's say, Ken Walker, for example. He was droppable at week 3 because Rashad Penny was handling every single touch. Ken Walker was injured. And more importantly, that Seahawks offense was averaging 47 plays per game. Why would you want that backup running back? It doesn't make any sense at all. And then suddenly, remember, in week 4, that's when they started going no huddle. That's when they started going faster and getting more play volume and becoming a much more explosive offense. They changed their ways entirely. So you were right in that pocket, but you're wrong in this pocket. I also look at Deontay Foreman 2 weeks ago, 9 touches, 7 yards. No Chuba Hubbard. Everyone thought after he had rushed for 100 yards and touchdown, like, of course, Deontay Foreman's the play. He bust entirely. And then Chuba Hubbard came back last week. We saw Raheem Blackshear still active. So I was tepid. And I thought, okay, like, I would actually start someone like Jeff Wilson over Deontay Foreman. I was very worried. Foreman, of course, goes for 31 carries, 130 yards, and a touchdown. And then I think someone sent my tweet to that particular account. And then I just, I muted them or blocked them. I did something because it's my feed, and my feed should not ever make me sad since it's my own. Like, you cannot personalize my life for me. But nonetheless, like, I think that was the conservative but correct analysis. Maybe not correct, but it was definitely telling you the situation. And then it happened to be wrong, which is okay. I don't mind that. But then, the getting dunked on portion is where you're ruining someone's day. That's what I can't get behind. So yes, just understand right and wrong. It happens in pockets. That's why Cold Takes Exposed, I also have blocked, because you should not be allowed to pull up something that was right at the time. Deontay Freeman's a bad prospect. And then suddenly Devontae Freeman's like good at football, right? Like, that's not fair. You cannot pull that back up. And also, by the way, which is why I would sell Deontay Foreman. Fantasy receipts can't steal a clip, so we're okay. But I would sell Deontay Foreman given the fact that Chuba Hubbard still did come back, and now this offense has Baker Mayfield, and we don't expect them to win games with 16 pass attempts every week.
Yeah, there's just a certain point for teams, I think, that they got a little shot of adrenaline with Steve Wilkes and with energy he brought to the team, and they outplayed my expectations against Atlanta, first place Atlanta. Yep. But I think that you're still going to see this offense. This is that really strange alchemy of, by trading Christian McCaffrey, you kickstart the running game. I don't understand, but that's, fantasy football has had a few of those this year, that those conflicted feelings. So speaking about like potential change or cataclysm, like let's try to anticipate or maybe rule out something and say what we can get out ahead of. For instance, Deshaun Watson. Deshaun Watson's coming back in a couple of weeks. Anything there? We talked about David Njoku, certainly. And one of the things that cuts through all this, like Travis Etienne and Justin Fields, the windows, Kenneth Walker, is in my mind is always keep in mind the best case scenario and how much weight would that best case scenario, how much could it change your season? How much could it change the destiny of your fantasy team? And even if we haven't seen evidence for that best case scenario coming to fruition, think about that. Maybe that gives you a little bit of a hesitation before dropping a player or before moving on from a situation that, of course, go ahead.
You know who the cover boy of that statement is DeAndre Swift right now, because you can't start him, but the Lions have the easiest projected fantasy schedule for opposing running backs. So like DeAndre Swift, especially for a winning team, is a player I'm trying to trade so low for right now, because that's still 3-4 weeks away. I don't need to start DeAndre Swift. I understand some teams may want to right now, but for a team that doesn't need to, like that's a potential RB1 you could trade for pennies right now. So DeAndre Swift is literally the cover image of that.
I'm totally going to steal that in my. I'm not going to steal it.
Have at it.
I'm not, but no, that's a good one, because how long ago it seems, the beginning of the season, John, 2 months ago, DeAndre Swift looked like a player that you just gave him like 12 or 15 touches a game. He was going to get 150 total yards and a touchdown, or maybe multiple touchdowns. And he has a touchdown. He was tackled at the one. Like he's been doing enough to suffer through what he's doing. But also, I think the idea always was it was going to be about 4 weeks after the bye before he was really ready to be ramped back up. So I agree with you that DeAndre Swift is a player that, again, it's that best case scenario. We already saw it, and then it just got cut short. And you might say, well, that's your indicator that we aren't going to get back there because he's not going to get healthy again. But I like that call, and I like that idea of, again, something that could be very different in a few weeks than what we're looking at right now. So going back to the Browns, do you see a Deshaun Watson effect? Do you see a big lift for this offense, something people might want to get out ahead of with him coming back in 2 weeks?
I just keep looking at the schedule for when he returns against the Texans, Bengals, Ravens, Saints, and Commanders. And the Ravens are the only ones who really offer pushback against opposing quarterbacks, especially after the addition of Roquan Smith. So that's what I've been looking at, is the easy playoff schedule for Deshaun Watson. But then I recall he was still bad in the preseason, and I know it's just the preseason, but he also took a year and a half off of football, or did not take it off. Got pushed out for a year and a half. So there's a reason for that. So I am slightly worried, but you could then again, let's go back to macro, where we're not dropping Taysom Hill because of the landscape. And what quarterback are you happy with if you don't have Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, or Patrick Mahomes, right, or Lamar Jackson right now? And the answer is none. Like there are people that can't drop Aaron Rodgers because there's no other option. We keep starting Daniel Jones. We keep starting Geno Smith. But we keep starting Marcus Mariota. Like Mariota, there's no guarantee he makes it through this week, but it's a good matchup against the Bears.
Right.
Like we don't have a choice. So I think Deshaun Watson will be a starter for some playoff team, even in one quarterback leagues, just because like there's nowhere else to go.
Yeah, that's fair. What I keep getting back to is all the games except for the first one back against Houston are cold weather games. And I know he didn't want to go to a cold weather team. There's a bunch of things. Let me put it this way. If Deshaun Watson struggles for the first few games out of the gate, there's going to be a bunch of things people will point to right away. Like, oh, well, new offense, new teammates, new playing outdoors in cold weather, and the layoff from football. A bunch of things that make sense in foresight. I'm not sure how that works out. But the idea being that if we see this offense continue to underperform in the passing game, not that Jacoby Brissett's been playing poorly, but it's not exactly an explosive passing game. And we'll see what Deshaun Watson can do. But you're right to look at this. If you look at the schedule, you don't think about the settings for the games. They should be matchups where the Browns offense. The Browns in general have been a team, one of those teams I'm talking about, where like some weeks, they made Lamar Jackson and Joe Burrow look powerless to move the ball. And then to a company, it's just an air show. Their offense also has games where their running game can really just take over the character of the game. And then other games where Nick Chubb doesn't really matter. Kareem Hunt barely making an impact. They're just this week's going to be
a really interesting litmus test because, like, since the bye the last 3 weeks, the Bills defense has also been pretty leaky on the ground. They're allowing over 6 yards per carry. And so, like, that's a good get right spot for Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. So I'll be very interested to see, especially because it's supposed to be a snow game in Buffalo.
Right. That's, again, cold weather, it's changing. And all of a sudden we might be talking about Buffalo and wondering, like, where are they going to play week 1 of the playoffs on the road? Because that's just how razor thin the margins are. And Kansas City might start really opening up, especially for that number 1 seed, a gap there. But for Cleveland, they're playing to keep up this season, having a pulse in terms of playoff hopes in this game. And I think they get Tampa next week. So Tampa coming off of a bye. Whew. All right. Last couple of things before we just go off the rails. Okay. Backup running backs. At least one backup running back is going to hit, right? I mean, just the odds tell us that. So who are you stashing at the end of your bench?
So I do a contingency top 10 is what I call it. Basically, and I refresh it. I update it every single week in the waiver wire column, and I account for usage changes, targets, touches, environment, remaining schedule, all of it. And it's literally only available. You can only be ranked in that list. For instance, like Alexander Madison, a Samaj P. Ryan, because you're not providing value. You are strictly a contingency option. So this week when I refreshed it, I took out Jalen Warren and Rachaad White, for example, and I bumped up, because you're asking about backups I'm targeting.
Yeah.
I bumped up Dontrell Hilliard, Keontae Ingram, and Matt Breida in particular, and Keyshawn Bond. But those three I want to talk about because James Conner, injury prone, for a reason. Like, he's better than all of us. He fought off cancer, and he's been injured every year because, his body's different. Just this past week, only handled every single running back touch except one of them. Like, a workload that James Conner historically cannot and has not sustained. And yet the team cut Benjamin on Monday. So now with Keontae Ingram as the only surviving backup since Darrell Williams remains on injured reserve, you have to get Keontae Ingram stashed on your benches, thinking he will eventually take over for James Conner for injury reasons. Matt Breida behind Saquon Barkley. Since Barkley, again, we've seen those injuries crop up, and he just handled a career high in touches, or a career high in carries, I should say. I hope it sustains. I don't know if it will. And then ever since Derrick Henry first popped up in the injury report with a foot injury a couple weeks ago, he's played less than 60% of snaps in back-to-back games and handled just 21 touches per game compared to the 3 starts before that when he handled at least 30 touches in every game. I think something may be happening. I think something may be lingering still. So I also bumped Dontrell Hilliard up a lot.
I agree with Hilliard. I've been bringing him up every week on the waiver wire column, and partially because he's had explosive touches already this year. I mean, very limited role, John. He's put his stamp on a few games. He had a 2 touchdown game earlier in the season. So yeah, I think that you hit on a big one there. And Ingram too, with Connor, because of his injury history. Ingram looked game. He looked like he belonged on an NFL field. And then some of the old standbys, of course, there's still Samaje P. Ryan just because he's a 3-down back, and Alexander Madison.
Yeah.
I like going even deeper. My coda to this, because I think that, John, I think we can even go a step deeper. And there's some 3rd string running back. There's someone on a practice squad that's going to matter in fantasy football this year, right? There's someone who's like a healthy scratch, right? I mean, you think that's at least like a 50-50 proposition, yeah?
Even deeper, yes. I guess so. JaMychal Hasty, who is the only active running back every single week behind Travis Etienne, who's now getting every single touch. Rex Burkhead is out there in a lot of leagues, and Rex Burkhead doesn't have more than 3 touches in 3 consecutive games. Like, it's been all Dameon Pierce. So what happens when Dameon Pierce gets injured? It's going to be all Rex Burkhead, presumably. And so that's another deep option I have. And then if he's out there, Isaiah Spiller, I think is interesting as well. The past 2 games, we've seen Sony Michel not handle any more than 1 touch. They swapped them coming out of their bye. Spiller's now the backup. Austin Eckler handling such a large workload that maybe he doesn't survive into the winter months as well.
Yeah, those are all good for.
You want deeper? I don't have deeper.
No. Those are all good. No. Those are guys that actually are like one step away. Like, something could happen this week that makes you really happy you have them on their bench. I think those are all good calls because they're unobstructed for opportunity. And at least in the Chargers, offense should be getting better. I feel like they just can't get that number 2 running back spot right, no matter what they do. But you're right. That Spiller right now, I don't know if it would devolve into a committee or not, but absolutely Hasty has that path. ETN could get overworked. Philadelphia is interesting. simply because Miles Sanders is approaching his career high in carries already. So you can say, well, that's just numbers, fluke, whatever. You could say, like, chances are he's not going to hold up for 250 carries, 275 carries. At least history indicates that. But that's where I'm going to go deeper. These aren't guys to stash right now, John. These are guys that I'm going to say, don't be shocked. Be ready to act if the wheels start to turn, to put these players in a spot for more opportunity. And that's where I bring up Trey Sermon. I bring up Trey Sermon because teams don't use roster spots on players that they don't see value in. Now, I mean, there's the Jets with their weird stuff with Denzel Mims and Elijah Moore. I mean, there are teams that like kind of spite players and say you're going to work. You're like parenting. You're going to work. You're going to learn your lesson. You're just suffering right now, but you're going to learn in the end that it was a lesson for your own good or something like that. Putting that stuff aside, they claimed Trey Sermon. They don't have any hammer. They don't have a hammer on the roster. Right. I mean, that's
right.
On the active game day rosters. Now, because they could go to Boston Scott a little more, Kenneth Gainwell. And remember, this team redefined themselves as a power running team second half of the year last year. I'm not saying they're going to do that this year because Jalen Hurts has made a lot of steps as a passer. Passing game is better. Trey Sermon. Another one. Ronald Jones. I mean, that's
a name I haven't heard in a while.
But listen, I mean, we know he has juice. That's never been the question with Ronald Jones. It's just it's the upstairs, but it's also that, again, why are the Chiefs keeping him? Why even keep him on the roster? Right? Why? I think that there was even some teams that called about him. I'm pretty sure I saw that in an item, that there were some teams that called about Ronald Jones. And the last one I'll bring up is Justin Jackson. He's just a guy that always looks like he can play when he gets on the field. It's just staying on the field. DeAndre Swift hopefully will get healthy. Jamal Williams, this is a good offense. Okay.
And Jackson has been used over Craig Reynolds the past 2 games now. It's very clear, like he's the backup running.
Yeah, Reynolds is on IR. Reynolds is a nice, fun underdog story. But either way, it's been a good offense. Okay. I cut a little bit going deep, but this is the kind of stuff rattling around the corners of our mind right now at this point in the fantasy football season, staying alive. But when we look ahead to after the fantasy football season, if I just say clear your mind, John, what are you most looking forward to when the season's over?
Immediately Super Bowl weekend, I believe I am hitting a mini vacation. We'll still do some stuff, but mini vacation and headed to Ireland.
Oh,
because let's wrap up John Daigle's life here, the last 6 months, because it's been a little tough. Last we talked two episodes ago, not in this off season. But I had moved to Chicago for a loving relationship. That relationship ended. No one's fault. Everyone's happy. It's okay. But the past 5-6 months of my life has been really, really tough behind the scenes, admittedly. And then I found myself, since I moved to the city without really a support system, without a friend group, I moved here for a relationship. I then found myself in my mid-30s asking, okay, what does someone do now? Dropped into an entirely new situation. How do you be happy? What do you want? What do you do? And, it not only led to therapy, but it also has led to me making friends in a new city in my mid-30s, which I'm very thankful for. And some of those friends are people who actually just watched all of my shows or listened to my stuff and just had reached out and said, hey, like, I also live north of the city. If you ever want to grab a beer. And it's like, at this time in my life, yes. Like, I just need, people to talk to. I need a comfort system. And there have been a lot of people who've been very kind, who I consider some of my best friends. Rich Rebar's in Cleveland, Chris Allen, him and his wife in Dayton always invite me over, like, just in case I need to escape the thoughts and the negativity of the city, which I'm so grateful for. But in my time making new friends, one of them, David, in Gaelic, I think it's Daiti, but David, his dad happens to be a tour guide for the entire country of Ireland, not just Dublin, but the entire place. So much so that he's trying to step into retirement, and his job right now is teaching people to be tour guides of Ireland. And not only then am I going to meet up with him, but I'm going to stay in his home with his wife for Super Bowl weekend, because he also doesn't have anyone to talk to in Ireland about American football. And I'm just going to drink Guinnesses and Irish whiskey with him for the Super Bowl. get a blueprint of the country, and then take off for a week on my own that Monday morning. And so I think expanding my circle, getting back out there with confidence post heart-shattering breakup, and just trying to find myself again and be comfortable again on my own. That's what I'm looking most forward to this offseason, as my voice already begins shaking when I talk about it.
Yeah. Wow. Well, John, you always, one of the things I love about the time we get to spend together on the couch is that you're always authentic. You're an authentic human being. And I appreciate the level that you share, because I think we are all going through it. And social media has made this so much worse. Like, it's almost like, especially because of American culture too, like you're weak if you're saying I'm having a hard time, and it's like
so
we're all
unfortunate
having a hard
though,
time.
Sig.
Yeah,
it really is, because there are so many people that are so much smarter, so much funnier than I am on social media, and I want to talk to all of them. There's so many good people I interact with.
Yeah.
It's just that one person, like that one bad poker loss we've all had, stands out significantly more than the million we've won. And that's okay. Is that not it to you? Maybe that's my own, my therapist would say, maybe that's my view that I need to change.
Yeah, it's all I always come back to the term that I come back to is self-regulation. So many things in our lives, so many things inside of us regulate themselves and come to its own equilibrium that works. And we aren't the conscious self that we are. There's a lot of, it's just like, John, like when you cut yourself, you don't tell your body to clot the blood and rebuild the tissue. It just does it, right? There's stuff going on like that with our psyche too. And that's when we talk about therapy. Like that's some of the stuff you delve into to try to unpack it so that you can be more effective getting into some of that architecture that we built to deal with pain, to deal with trauma, and we're projecting it forward into the future. We're bringing it into the present, and it's overlaying like what's actually happening and trying to unpack that. But I want to go back to something really uplifting you were talking about. And it's happened to me too. And I think even we have a little bit of this kind of kismet through a contact we had a long time ago that you've talked about on this show. That, one of the things that social media and all this weird attention getting as a profession, I just want attention for my own self, and then I can get paid for that. I can get paid for wanting attention. Yeah, it's a weird future, but I'm digging it. Is that it does bring people into your life, like you transmit your energy out there, and it draws that same kind of energy back. Like you talk about not taking victory laps. If you don't take victory laps, and people generally aren't going to be real hard on you when you're wrong. And if you're even better self-effacing about it, then you're acknowledging again that humanity in this. But the universe brings those people to you where, like you say, you can just enter into this. This is a non-judgmental, safe space for people. You feel like you leave your burdens at the door, and we're just all trying to help each other get through. And when the lights get turned off on Twitter or whatever happens, the volcano, I hear people talk about Pompeii, like we're like writing on the walls of Pompeii as the lava is coming down the hill, fantasy Twitter and whatever this community can recomprise itself has made a lot of people's lives better and continues to make a lot of people's lives better, and has created friendships and connections that transcend fantasy football. And actually it is about the friends we made along the way. I mean, that's actually what it's a joke or a cliche, but those things become cliches because we say them so often because they apply in the situations. And it's great to have so many of you out there as our friends, as our fantasy football friends.
Absolutely.
And we're going to find each other, however we have to, we'll find each other by hanging out on the couch always. I appreciate John for making time. I appreciate all for making time and continuing to encourage us. It makes us happy, and we want to make you happy because you're so classy.